What are the odds that two people execute one process exactly the same? This is a very relevant question if you want to ensure that you deliver the same level of service every time a customer calls you about a similar complaint, and your processes are in control and also ran efficiently. In reality, we see that this is much more difficult than one might think, and it's become increasingly complex the moment where we moved from visible paper stacks and processes towards the invisible digitized ERP systems, where we didn't really know where the workload and efficiencies lay. To take control over this, business process management has been introduced. And it's the science of designing, modeling, explaining and monitoring how processes should flow in the organization and making sure that there is consistency on the output and compliance on how processes should run. Basically creating a framework and a map on what you should do at which point in time in any process that the organization has. Having such maps also allows organizations to start improving their processes because they know what should happen and they can discuss how that matches towards reality and where these inefficiencies still lay. This is what we call a continuous improvement. However, when we look at reality, it's still very difficult to get control over these processes because what we see is that processes that are designed are much more simplified compared to what happens on a day-to-day basis. Processes are having many different deviations, exceptions, and people executing in different ways, but these process maps are not able to capture this reality. Due to this, the process maps become much more irrelevant because they're not reliable and they're disconnected from reality. And this means that processes don't work as we think they work, and we're making decisions on inaccurate assumptions. Secondly, because there are so many process maps that are already outdated, it's very difficult for people to find what are the relevant maps to work with. And in reality, people don't really use those maps and they're collecting dust from day one. All the work that we put into designing these processes is not resulting in actual impact. This has been one of the main problems that Professor Wil from Aalst started tackling already in the 90s. They call it process mining, comparing how processes should run versus reality when looking at the data and the timestamps that we have in the ERP systems. It took a while before we had collected enough data in our ERP systems, but right now process mining is a very relevant field to improve your processes on a day-to-day basis. So what is process mining? It's really the intersection between the process science world, how do we design a process, what should happen in a process, and how can we control process, with the data science world, from data mining, statistics, really understanding based on reality and data out of the ERP systems, what is happening. By overlapping these two, we create the digital twin and reality, something that we call process mining. With process mining, we actually help organizations understand how their processes flow on reality. That is possible because every time you take an activity in an IT system, a piece of data is being generated that we call a digital breadcrumb. And that piece of data tells us what happened, at which point in time, for what case. And that could be an invoice. So it allows us to actually look through the systems on how an invoice has been created, has been perhaps changed, and has been paid at some point in time. And this creates that digital twin with a whole reality on what happens end to end with all your processes. Knowing that we can actually get this process transparent, why is it relevant? Well, when we look at how we designed processes, we all already know that reality is a bit different. There's deviations, there's other steps, people might be taking a smarter but not compliant route. So processes actually run more difficult than we think. However, in reality, we see it's even more complex. When we start combining all of those digital breadcrumbs and look in an organization end to end how, for example, purchase to pay process runs, we see that processes are in reality extremely complex, full of deviations, full of steps that people didn't expect they need to be taken. And that's what we're aiming to solve with process mining. Show the complexity that's out there and start reducing that complexity through continuous improvement. So how does that work? First, when we look at process mining, we can start looking at the order of activities, something we call conformance. Are activities happening in the right timing, but also are certain activities allowed or not allowed? Secondly, we want to be able to have process insights. Do we see activities, for example, that happen twice, even though they should happen only once? Or are certain activities manually done Well, we have automations for it. And lastly, how much time do we actually see in between certain activities? So analyzing conformers, rework, manual effort, but also the throughput times between these activities are all giving us a lot of insights into understanding and finding inefficiencies and potential improvements. That's always how we work with process mining, through a 4F methodology: find, frame, fix, and foster. First, we find what's going on in the process. We make a digital twin and help you understand the reality compared to how it should run. Based on those gaps, we can frame the value of those inefficiencies. If we know that someone took 10,000 times this manual activity, you can calculate the impact that it has on your productivity as an organization. So by framing the impact of these inefficiencies, it allows you to create a priority and urgency in your organization to also fix those problems. Fixes can take place with process mining, but often are falling within the people, process, or technology pillars. And if those pillars have been used, processes have been fixed. The great thing about process mining is that it's not a one-off exercise. What I said already, we're looking at those digital breadcrumbs. And IT systems are continuously creating these digital breadcrumbs. And we can connect to it and make sure that in real time we can keep seeing what's happening to also monitor the impact of the changes that we made. And in that way, process mining helps you to uncover inefficiencies, fix these inefficiencies, and also foster that the solutions actually are being used and being productive. This was a short but hopefully clear explanation of what is process mining. We have many more videos that also go more in depth with demos around process intelligence, where you add more data to be able to better steer your processes, or talk about adherence of processes. Click the videos in the links below.